check out ESPN Film's newly released 30 for 30 podcasts. From the producers of our award-winning documentary series, this is an amazing collection of sports stories you need to hear to believe. Speaking of amazing, Delta Airlines and the Fly Delta app make your travel experience amazingly easy with real-time bag tracking, e-boarding, and passport scanning during check-in. And don't forget to download 30 for 30 podcasts to fill your flight with stories that will keep you coming back for more.
Pardon the interruption, but I'm Bomani Jones. A Pablo, police in Las Vegas is searching for a naked man who was spotted wandering outside a Walmart.
I'm Pablo Torre, and Kornheiser's in Vegas.
Wow, do you take a bus?
That makes sense. Well, the man does not like flying.
Yes.
So a bus is not entirely unreasonable for his way of life.
Except it's Tony Kornheiser.
Well, it's a nice bus.
Got a point there, Madden Cruiser. Welcome to PTI. Tony and Mike are still enjoying the fruits of their well-negotiated contract, so I'm joined today by my great friend and future co-host, Pablo Torre. Yes, right. And we begin with the Miami Dolphins, who announced Sunday they signed Jay Cutler. After considering Colin Kaepernick, Tim Tebow, and Kyle Orton, Cutler inked a one-year deal for $10 million with incentives tied to the team making the playoffs and the offense finishing in the top 10. With Ryan Tannehill, the Dolphins would be a playoff contender. But Pablo, what's realistic of the Dolphins to expect from their offense with a 34-year-old Cutler who's coming off a torn labrum?
That torn labrum part gets buried a lot, but it feels instrumental to the conversation because I read that Peter King report, Bo, where it says $1 million if it's a top 10 offense. And I keep hearing also about the magical season Adam Gase had with Jay Cutler when Gase was coordinator and Cutler was QB in 2015 in Chicago. But I went and looked up the stats on that offense, and this is how it went. 21st in yards per game and 23rd in points per game. Like, I know the receivers weren't great, the offensive line wasn't great for those Bears, but apparently also 30% roughly of Cutler's yards went 2 yards or fewer downfield. Like, all of this seems like a bad idea.
Except the whole point, though, behind this is why Gase and Cutler were supposedly such a good match is that Adam Gase is the guy who could get Jay Cutler to throw the passes within 2 yards of the line of scrimmage, right? The whisperer, the quarterback whisperer. We love talking about this sort of thing. And if you're Gase, you kind of have to do this because what really got Adam Gase this job? I got Jay Cutler to stop throwing interceptions. Sure. He only threw 11 in the course of that year. But I don't know what is realistic for them to expect. Because, look, if they're paying him $10 million, that tells me they think that Tannehill's going to have the surgery. They think that Jay Cutler's going to be their quarterback. And Jay Cutler hasn't played all 16 games since 2009. So what is realistic to expect when it's not realistic to expect the dude to even play? Can he get them to 8-8? Are they going to avoid him throwing them out of games? Because he has a tendency to throw people out of games. This is a total crapshoot.
It feels like it's 6 or 7 wins to me. That's the ceiling. But the thing that's especially interesting is that you're right. Adam Gase is owning this offense in the most Adam Gase way possible. He looked at Matt Moore, who I know you like, and he said, no, that's not the guy for me. Get me Jay Cutler. And this, I think, is the headline of the AFC East now. The NFL's, or possibly sports' most predictable division gets even more predictable. Like, they're going to be worse, and now they're going to be worse with more turnovers involved, and that's kind of how this is going to go.
Now, let's be fair to Jay Cutler. The biggest problem that he has as a professional football player is that damn look on his face, right? The biggest impediment.
The press conference today was bad.
Right, but in the way that people receive him, that look on his face is what holds him up more than anything. It will be very interesting to see a man whose face always says, I don't care, in a city that will quickly say, I don't care to the football team if they start 0-3.
Well, at least we know that it's good to like football by debating whether you really like football, while a guy who really wants to play football never gets a shot. Colin Kaepernick. So. But we move now to a player who's indisputably great, because LaDainian Tomlinson's speech Saturday has been called, quote, one of the most poignant and stirring speeches ever given at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, end quote. Some wondered if the former running back might one day run for office based on excerpts like this.
On America's team, let's not choose to be against one another. Let's choose to be for one another. My great-great-great-grandfather had no choice. We have one. I pray we dedicate ourselves to be the best team we can be, working and living together, representing the highest ideals of mankind. I am asking you to believe in your ability to bring about change, to hold fast to the faith and the idea whispered by slaves. Yes, we can. Thank you.
So, Bo, will Tomlinson's speech there have a lasting impact?
I would like to start by saying that was a very good speech, even though Barack Obama might want to hit him with some copyright infringement there with some of that stuff. I was like, I've heard this before. I'm trying to figure out where. Oh, that's why it sounds like he's running for office.
Homage,
yes, like we've kind of heard that in a little bit of a way. Now, I think there's something very interesting about this. We are talking about Tomlinson's Hall of Fame speech, which talked about this reconciliation, basically, the notion of everybody coming together. But the Kenny Easley Black Lives Matter drop during his speech went over like a fart in church. This got like a couple of claps and people went along with it, but I didn't find it to be stirring, right? Like I didn't find it to be something new. I didn't find it to be like really audacious or daring in that sort of way. But I think that Tomlinson ultimately means well. But it's almost a reminder of the great Peter Tosh saying, everyone's crying out for peace. No one wants justice, right? Like that's the thing. Peace is an easy thing to talk about. Let's all get along. Everybody's down with that. Like, yeah, let's go ahead and let's get along. But the means to getting along has a whole lot to do with confronting what is actually happening, confronting what continues to happen.
Right.
And it's just a little bit too easy to just be like, how about we all just get together? What's the reason that we are not together? Once you get to the answer to that one, then it stops being as easy and breezy as people want it to be.
Yeah, as a football player, A+. Like, do not begrudge him that at all. But people seem to be looking to him as part of our perpetual search for new national political inspirational figures as potentially a senator. Something like that in his future. And on that level, I agree. There's a very cinematic biography here, right? Great-grandfather, a slave, Tomlinson Hill. You go down through the lineage of the Tomlinsons and you realize this truly is inspirational. But in the context of what is this going to do for the national consciousness, how is this going to change anything, on that level, it seemed and this sounds mean, but it seemed a little like a cliche. And I don't mean that in the sense that these are not values that we should trumpet. I just mean that, and this is the most generous thing I could say about it, it's really nice to hear that, especially right now. Like, I go to the movies now, Bo, and I kind of shed a tear at apocalyptic scenarios that I never considered realistic, because this is something that, at the very least, is positive in a time of negativity.
Right. And the tricky part is I feel bad because he gave a good speech that was about his life, and there's a level of dissection that is not necessarily fair to give, but once you decide we're going to make him into Senator Tomlinson, I got to be like, oh, slow down, buddy, it wasn't that good.
And let's talk about the odds of LaDainian Tomlinson existing. Not the fact that it happened, but why aren't more people getting those opportunities like that?
There we go. Now, moving on, as most of us only watch track and field during the Olympics, this weekend was the first time many of us saw Usain Bolt lose. Bolt finished third in the 100 meters at the Track and Field World Championships behind America's Justin Gatlin and Christian Coleman. Bolt didn't win his semifinal heat either, and his trademark slow starts looked downright sluggish. Going into the race, this was seen as his farewell to the sport. But Pablo, after losing to someone 5 years older than him, are we sure Bolt will walk away on a losing note?
Well, let's remind ourselves, because it's fun to remind ourselves, that no one in Olympic history had won the 100 and 200 2 years in a row. The dude did it 3 times. In terms of track, no one else had invented the car, and the dude was tooling around in a spaceship for a really long time. So in terms of what he sees next, I have to remind myself that as much as he enjoyed driving around said spaceship, he didn't need to. He especially didn't need to do it this year. If he was a person who believed that his legacy historically would be ruined by a loss, I don't think he would have run this year. And so I'm inclined to think that there's more peace in his world than we may think.
Well, stay for what? Right? Like, that becomes the answer. Like, is this going to be, I am going to track down Justin Gatlin until I get to go out on a win, and then I'm going to go away, right? Like, are we imagining him as Michael Jordan, who would keep going 2 out of 3? 3 out of 5.
Exactly.
5 out of 7. Like, this doesn't necessarily seem to be that guy. He is the greatest Olympian that we have ever seen. The gap between him and the field in the 100 meters in 2008 in Beijing is one of the craziest things that I think that we have ever seen. I mean, he had time to stunt on them before he crossed the finish line and still break a world record. He is that good. But stick around this for what? And we have to sometimes entertain the possibility that this particular great competitive athlete is not wired in the ways that we expect, quote-unquote, competitive athletes to be wired.
Right. When you have ego, it's supposed to be the case that you are then desperate until eternity. But this isn't Jordan with the Wizards. This isn't Joe Montana with the Chiefs. If Usain Bolt ran a race in a month, this same race, I'd probably bet on Usain Bolt, assuming that he got to recover from the back injury that was ailing him. So to me, the thing is, we saw Usain Bolt in his peak. He could still return to that peak, but yeah, what's left for us to talk about if he were to climb that mountain again.
There's also something weird about that race. Those three guys, nobody ran faster than a 9.9, right? In 2017, to have three finalists at 9.9 or slower is a shock.
Right, and you go down that list of all the 100-meter records, cross out the guys who've known to be on steroids, and it's just Usain Bolt. And even if we're cynical, even if Usain Bolt is Lance Armstrong, man, what a world that he made for himself. That's just incredible. We're going to move now, though, to a man who has achieved greatness, to a man searching for it. Kyrie Irving. Kyrie's former general manager, David Griffin, appeared on The Jump this afternoon and had this to say about Irving's trade demand. Quote, he handled the situation exactly like he was supposed to. The absolute worst thing this guy could have done was pretend to be all in and sink the ship from within. Most guys don't have the courage to do what he did. So, Bo, would you call what Kyrie did courageous?
That's a pretty low standard there for courage, buddy, right? Like, I know sometimes we get caught searching for words, and courage is one that's a bit overused. But would I call it courageous? No. Now, would I call it adult, mature, and responsible? I would say all of those things. And I think perhaps in the NBA, that's what passes for courageous sometimes. But I do believe for him to walk in and just be like, look, this isn't working for me. I want to go somewhere else. There are a lot of guys who would not be willing to walk into what comes from that. Because when you say you want the trade, now all of a sudden you're at the mercy of the fans who believe that you should want to stick around their little town forever. And he did have that time he told that kid he wasn't going to leave, right? No, he got in there and said, look, I want something different. Let's go toward making that happen. And I do think it's fair to say for someone of his age to have the temerity to walk in and look at the owner and say, deuces, there's something to it.
Yeah, if courage is also a synonym for cojones, then yes, Kyrie Irving has major courage. But one of the things that you have to factor in, too, in terms of how it's interesting that David Griffin, the GM, former GM of the team, is evaluating this, Kyrie Irving had to realize that at some point this would leak out. So it is not necessarily the best thing to do for the team if you are sure that your list of trade demands is going to be leaked to the outside public, at which point, of course, it may be courageous, but it's also counterproductive to the Cavaliers. Because at that point, they're trying to sell you a car that they have seats, you know, of a leather that's allergic to them. Like, you don't want anyone else to know about it because it's going to depress the value, but you still got to get rid of it, and that's a problem for them.
Yeah, the one thing about him, though, he's got 2 years left on that deal, and there are a lot of people that want a player of that age. There have been few players who have been on the trade market in this way where they're as desirable as Kyrie Irving. Like, I mean, now, he's not Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, right? But I imagine in 1975 when the world found out that Kareem wanted to get out of Milwaukee, people weren't like, hold on, we now know he wants to be traded. We don't want to get on board with that. When they do ultimately move him, they will get a lot because there will be a lot of suitors who are interested in him. So I don't think he hurt anybody in doing this. I just think the way he decided to go about that and just say, look, this is what I want it to be. He's better than me. I'd have told my agent to go in there and talk to them. Your agent make how much money? Your agent's job's to go in there and have conversations you don't feel like having.
Right. Your agent's job is to mask the reality that you just don't want to play with the best player in basketball history because that's not very good for your brand and your general quality of life, which is a kind of a hard sell to do.
Or your basketball career, if you want to be honest. Let's take a break. But coming up, the Los Angeles Dodgers have won 44 out of their last 51 games. So why aren't we talking about them until our second segment?
And it's Josh Norman. Is he right that the NFL is singling him out by banning his bow and arrow celebration?
It is kind of cool, although, I mean, Usain Bolt's like quasi.
That's right.
That's a lot better. Let me do that again. I just saw it on camera with you.
Yep, there it is.
Pardon the Interruption is brought to you by Gillette, the best a man can get.
You're listening to Love Advice with Leanne. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Leanne. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Why, in your professional opinion, do you never take my calls off the air?
Is this Carl?
Yep, it's Carl. I mean, we had a few dates. Everything was great. I thought,
Well, you know, when you switch to Geico, you could save a lot of money on car insurance.
Okay, awesome.
You should call them.
I will.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Mail time. So you write into Tony and Mike, get answers from me and Pablo.
Yeah.
See what's in here first.
Mail time!
Do the Dodgers deserve more attention for what they're doing?
So it's wildly hypocritical of me to say what I'm about to say because we agreed to put this in the B block of this show. But yes, of course they do. I am a champion of the 18-1 Patriots and the 73-9 Warriors and the 116-win Mariners. We believe that if you don't have a ring, your season was meaningless. Let's appreciate these guys for the insane bit of large sample testing that they are accomplishing right now.
Yeah, but the only thing about it is, because, they should get more attention because this is one of the best runs in baseball that we have seen in quite a long time. But there's nothing especially charming about what's going on here, right? So take the 98 Yankees, for example. They won all those games that year, but part of the charm of that team was it was a kind of scrappy sort of outfit, for lack of a better term. It wasn't like this big budget operation that we're getting with the Dodgers. The 2001 Mariners, part of the story there was that was after Alex Rodriguez left. Then the following year they get Ichiro and they put together this crazy run. This is just a team winning a whole lot of games in the wrong time zone. So the question for me is, if this were the Yankees doing the exact same thing, would we care more, or has baseball just fallen in the national consciousness in such a way that not even they would get our attention?
Next letter.
What we got now?
We got... does Josh Norman have a valid gripe about the NFL banning his bow and arrow celebration?
So, the NFL sent somebody to training camp for the R's, and they let Josh Norman know his bow and arrow celebration would no longer be allowed. Any demonstration that has to do with weaponry, they're not going for.
No.
And Josh Norman says it's not like anybody's going to get their bow and arrow out of the car, but he doesn't know that. This is why I'm okay with it, because the NFL does not do well when they try to parse, right? They do not do well with nuance. They are very good at, we're just going to make all this stuff illegal so we don't have to think about it anymore. And what they've said is all things weaponry are now illegal. So you can't come out there with your Uzi, you can't come out there with your bow and arrow. But if you want to do a slingshot with a rock, you think they let you do that?
Yeah, can you go Little Rascal celebration? I don't know if they're allowed to do that. But Josh Norman has a point here. And the point is, this is a letter of the law rule, and this is something that meets the spirit of said law. But if I'm Josh Norman, I'm also secretly very happy because now, despite your admittedly kind of quaint bow and arrow celebration, you're the rebel. You're the guy who must be shut down, and that's something for his image, his notion of himself. That's kind of badass.
And he gets to come up with something else. All right, we got more. Let me see what we got here.
Yes.
Do you have a problem with FAMU's 10-hour bus ride en route to a $750,000 game with Arkansas?
So we know that FAMU was on the road because one of the things that happens in college football is a big school pays a lot of money to a little school if that little school comes and visits them. And so is this demoralizing and kind of dehumanizing for a bunch of kids that got to ride a 10-hour bus? Yes. But is this also kind of noble because those same kids are responsible for one of the biggest paychecks that university may cash all year? Also, yes. So as much as this is kind of a sign of the terrible creep of college football, I kind of get why they're doing it.
Okay, hold on. Let's just take a moment, though, because I understand why this is all going on. I'm not as hard on the school about this because I understand the financial situations of HBCU athletic departments. This is what they have to do to fund the whole thing, right? What would it take to get you to ride a bus for 10 hours? Just think of this in your head. You don't have to answer. What would it take? And then what would it take for you to ride 10 hours simply for the pleasure of going to Arkansas? Now think riding 10 hours for the pleasure of riding to Arkansas to get the brakes beaten off of you.
That's right.
But this is the reality of the games that are out here right now. I do feel bad for those kids because they often take the physical scars of that all through the season because physically they can't withstand what's there.
And I guess it's also 10 hours home, which is just
after getting your brakes beaten off.
All right. Should this kid, Bomani, get promoted to the level above Little League?
All right, I would call him the little homie Jace Blaylock, but you will see very quickly I don't need to be calling him the little nothing. He's bigger than me and Pablo combined. Look at this dude.
Big homie.
Yeah, I can't tell if he's wearing 42 for Jackie Robinson or Ronnie Lott. Look at this. Look where this went.
And guess what?
Like, this has never happened before, I'm going to say. Like, this has never happened before, probably.
Dude, he could have hit that out of Comerica Park. Like, what is this? I wouldn't even want to give him dap when he came around because I imagine that would hurt entirely too much. I mean, there's certainly another level for him to play at. He is 13 years old, right? He is 13. He says he's 13. We're going to believe he's 13 because he says that he is 13. But he shouldn't be in little nothing.
375 feet. Metal bat or not, that is absurd. And it is the case that as someone who has skipped a grade, Bo, you should appreciate this. Your talent demands that you go to the next spot, but it's just not as fun for us if that's the case. I want to see this kid like giant Andy Reid in the punt, pass, and kick competition. Yeah. More giant kids is more fun.
I don't know if his talent requires him to go to the next level as much as compassion for the other children. that is what requires him to get up out of there. That's all the email we have time for. Now let's take one break, but still to come. Are the Browns making the right decision by starting Brock Osweiler in their first preseason game?
And is Greg Schiano fibbing when he says that Ohio State's current defensive line is better than any he had in the NFL?
That guy.
That guy's back.
That guy.
We're going to treat him well, though, the next segment, right?
That guy.
Very diplomatic.
Happy time.
Yeah.
Happy birthday to Mike Trout, the best baseball player on planet Earth, turns 26 today. Trout is finishing the top 2 in the MVP voting in each of his 5 full seasons, though that's unlikely this year after missing significant time with a thumb injury. If you see Mike Trout, tell him happy birthday. And if you don't recognize him, blame Major League Baseball, which has the new Mickey Mantle in a big market, but he somehow toils in obscurity.
The big problem with Mike Trout is that he wants to be liked, which is great. Doesn't want to be discussed, which is great. But the best way to get discussed in the modern era is to kind of be disliked. And such is the ballad and the misfortune of Mike Trout.
Happy anniversary to Barry Bonds. On this day 10 years ago, you hit your 756 home run, breaking Hank Aaron's all-time record. That may have been the day Bonds became the home run king, but for many it's the day being the home run king stopped mattering. No matter the allegations or whether he's the home run king, Barry Bonds is the best baseball player to debut after World War II, and that would be true if he didn't play a game after 1998.
And I hope the rehabilitation of Barry Bonds is underway, because he was the hitting coach in Miami a year or two ago. When we got past that, hopefully we can get past more.
A melancholy happy trails to both Don Baylor and Darren Dalton. Baylor, the 1979 American League MVP, played in 3 World Series in his 19-year career, winning a ring with the 1987 Minnesota Twins. Baylor was diagnosed with multiple myeloma 14 years ago when he and Mel Stottlemyre partnered to raise awareness of that form of cancer. Baylor was 68. Dalton passed away at the age of 55 after fighting brain cancer. His mullet was one of many on the 1993 Phillies, a team full of rough-around-the-edges fan favorites that pulled one of the great postseason upsets of the time by toppling the 104-win Braves. Dalton made 3 All-Star teams and in 1992 won a Silver Slugger while leading the league in runs batted in.
And Don Baylor's big accomplishment, of course, also was that he was the king of the hit-by-pitch, was only eclipsed by Craig Biggio, of course, but Biggio had all that armor. Don Baylor needed none of that.
All right, no errors today. Let's get to the big finish. Vince Wilfork retired after 2 seasons with the Texans and 11 with the Patriots. Your thoughts?
I miss him, and I want to buy a hat that just says ribs on it, which apparently he was wearing today. The Jets, they placed wide receiver Quincy Enunwa on injured reserve with a neck injury. Is that a big loss?
Ooh, a 2-win team now looks like a 1-win team. That's not good. Brock Osweiler will start for the Browns in their first preseason game on Thursday night. Surprised?
I am not. I want to sound the horn for Deshaun Kaiser, but I have a feeling we'll see him in the 3rd preseason game and every game thereafter. Greg Schiano saying his D-line at Ohio State is better than any he had in the NFL. Are you buying that?
Well, the issue is you talked about a Tampa team where you said Gerald McCoy, but that was just one guy. Another guy was Michael Bennett, who you didn't appreciate when you had him, got rid of him, only for him to turn into a star in the Super Bowl champion Seahawks. Why do you still not get it? Last one, the Yankees sack catcher Gary Sanchez yesterday because of his defensive struggles. Makes sense?
So Will Ferrell named his production company Gary Sanchez, and now he's a real guy, and now he's being benched for defense.
We're out of time. Thanks for watching. I'm Bomani Jones.
And I'm Pablo Torre. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. You can get the PTI podcast on the ESPN app or Apple Podcasts.